Imagine setting out on a journey that not only elevates your understanding of leadership, but transforms how you navigate personal growth and empowerment. Hear firsthand from industry leaders authentic stories, actionable insights, diverse perspectives, community engagement, and continuous learning. Welcome to Conversations That Matter. And now your host, Ed Ross.
Welcome back to another episode of Conversations That Matter. I am your host, Ed Ross, and I am excited, as always, about our guest. Now, I know sometimes when you tune in a podcast, people talk about how excited they are because the leader that they're bringing on is so insightful. I must say, leaders are more than insightful. Not only are they trailblazers, they are innovators. They are folks that have led in leadership capacities. They've been on that journey and they're able to bring their experiences and share those experiences with our audience. So I'm super excited for today's guest. She is a brilliant leader who has helped develop other leaders and is also doing some work in the area of ensuring that leadership legacy stays within the organization, within our communities, and as us as leaders, we're leaving a legacy that we can be proud of. So with that, it is an honor to introduce this episode's guest, Nicki Anderson. Welcome to today's podcast.
Welcome, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for that stellar introduction.
You're very welcome. It is well earned. And, I was earlier, before we actually hit the live button, Nicki and I were having a good laugh because I'm remote today. And, sometimes you have distractions and you got to be focused. But Nicki, that's very much like leadership, right? Mm-hmm. I like to say we get excited when we have these opportunities to lead and we have a vision of what that leadership is going to look like. However, sometimes the universe around us not align in the way in which we thought it was going to align, and that forces leaders to pivot and change. So during our conversation today, I'm very, very interested to have you share your experience as a leader, talk a little bit about the work that you did leading the leadership organization, and where you see us going overall as leaders, both as a profession and within the industries that we serve. So I'll stop talking there and give you an opportunity.
No, that's great. And I think the joy of this is just kind of going back and forth. So I'll start, and if you want to jump in and you have some questions. I started my entrepreneurial journey many years ago. I ran a health and fitness business. Started off on my own with these grand ideas. And lo and behold, after a few years, we grew. It was a successful business, but I went from an on the road trainer to a brick and mortar. And that, created a whole new host of opportunities and challenges, right? Because not only was I now in charge of a space, but I was in charge of 10 employees. With that, I started my writing career in that world. I started writing for magazines. I started writing a lot about business because at that time it was predominantly men who were running large health clubs. And so I was kind of this anomaly, right? I really worked my way in to say, hey, I want to talk about women and leadership and entrepreneurs in this world. And that's really how my business took off. So the foundation of my business, though it was working with clients and training people, my real business took off when I started lecturing and writing and opening up the doors for women who at that point were starting to lead the health clubs as aerobic instructors and wanting to open up their own Pilates and yoga studios. So it was a really interesting time, and I loved it because every day was new. And that is something that as leaders, it's a necessary part of being open to your point about pivoting. And because you really do never know. You have your business plan and you have your vision and you follow that. But anything, COVID, hello, right? Who had that in their business plan?
With growing a business, being a successful entrepreneur as you are, that comes with some challenges when we start talking about people leadership, right? Because now you said you're in a position where you've gone from this traveling business to brick and mortar, and not only brick and mortar, but brick and mortar with 10 other employees who are relying on your leadership, right? So that they can also be successful. Talk to us a little bit more about the challenge of understanding what those you support need from a leadership perspective. And what are some of the things that you've seen great leaders do?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think that's where I started to understand where my leadership skills started. But I also learned where my leadership skills ended. Fortunately, I'm a communicator. So I think the number one, well, two of the most important things in leadership with your team is communication, and that builds trust. So without communication, you don't have trust. And because I traveled a lot, I was relying on my team to really run the ship, right? And to trust that they could do that. So it started with training them really, really well to make sure that they had buy-in to my philosophy, which really was, taking care of my employees means they'll take care of my customers. And the more I loved my employees, the more they loved our customers or our clients, right? So I think that was the first thing is communication and trust. And with that comes any issues that come up, we always talked about it. Any challenges that came up, we would always talk about it. So I always felt like I had, you hear about the open door policy, but let's be clear. Your door could be open and nobody's going to come in, right? They don't want to bother you. So I challenge leaders to go out to your people, have their door open and go in and check on them. Just say, oh, my door's open, come in anytime. Some people might take advantage of it, but very few in my experience have done that. So I've learned to go to their door and hope that it's open so that I can see how they're doing and make sure that we have that connection, and always asking for feedback. The other thing that I did at the time that I think was kind of, people were not doing it a lot was I opened my books to my employees. They know exactly what it costs to operate and run a business. I was also in a business where I made it look easy. And so some people left to start their own business. And, there was, well, you have to have this contract signed that they can't, work with it. I didn't do that. Look, if I inspired you enough to go out and do something great, go do something great, because you will do it differently than I do. So I never had that scarcity mentality. I always had an abundance mentality. So I think that's important too. So that was really running that business, is making sure that communication and trust is solid. Because if it is, I truly believe that everything kind of, flows from there. And also, man, they're looking at me. What are my actions saying to them? Right? How do I interact with them? How do I interact with my clients? How do I talk about the business? How do I represent the business? All of that was an opportunity for them to learn and I don't know if I'd say emulate, but take it and make it their own. So I had great people. I'm very proud of the team that I had. But I got to a point where I was done. Where leadership begins and where it ends. And I just felt like I wasn't leading myself as well as I could, nor my team. And the industry was changing a lot. So that's when I decided to sell. And then I was recruited to run the second largest chamber of commerce in the state of Illinois, and the first woman in its 112-year history. So here's the challenge that I had. In 7 years, they had 6 leaders, and many of the same employees were still there.
Well, change fatigue for sure, right?
Right. And in their mind, here comes another one.
Yes.
Let's see how long, and I feel terrible for them to have that environment. So the first thing that I did that I think most any, good leader or self-aware leader would do is sit down with every one of those employees and say, tell me what's great. Tell me what's not. Tell me what's important to you. Tell me about you. Right? And really get to know them. And there were some people that, because I cared enough about them and the direction of the organization, that they didn't stay. I wanted them to go where they felt like it was meaningful for them. And because of the changes that I was going to make, I wanted them to be somewhere where it made sense for them. And if it didn't, I opened the door for them to go out and find what did. So it wasn't as much as a firing as it was just restructuring, which I guess is a nice way of saying some people were kindly let go. It wasn't a bad thing.
Yeah. And I've always believed, Nicki, that the best leaders want the best for their people. And I actually borrowed this from a leader who I worked with many, many moons ago in corporate, who said, the day that you stop having fun doing this job is the day we should probably talk. And I'd rather have you come and talk to me so that I can help you find that next thing versus you being miserable for months on end. And then just one day reach a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore. Right. I'd rather us have that dialogue and say, talk to me about what you enjoy and let me try to help find that, whether it's inside the organization or outside of the organization. And today, when we're adding new team members to either of the teams that I lead, I always like to ask people, tell me something about you that you would do regardless of the level of compensation.
Yeah.
Right. And they will give you these fascinating stories about things that bring them joy, talents that they have. And my goal then is to figure out where that thing exists in our business. Right.
Yes.
Yes. Coaching. I love coaching. I have this passion for youth sports. I love developing people. I'm starting to look for opportunities in our organization. While they may not be young athletes, we may have some high performers who have never led before. And that's an opportunity for you to take that skill that you have, that you love, and apply it in a different way, which allows you to grow.
Yes.
But fills your cup, right, with the thing that you like to do. So I love that. Makes me wonder, Nicki, because you said this earlier, you talked about development as a leader, right? For you, it sounds like your progression as an individual contributor led to the business. You were able to grow the business. You reached a point where you were like, okay, this isn't exactly what I want to continue doing. So you moved on. What strategies have you seen or implemented to help someone become an impactful people leader before they were in a people leader role, right? I think too often we know the story that people get promoted based on being outstanding individual contributors. They're given a role, we call it the hug and a high five, right? They give them a hug, they give them the high five, and they're like, you've got this, Nicki. Go out there. Meanwhile, we're on the other side of that conversation. We're like, no, what I really had was my last job. I knew that in and out. This whole leading 10 people thing, right? That's a bit new to me.
Yeah.
What have you seen that has been impactful in helping people prepare to become leaders before they may have the official title?
I think first of all, it comes with understanding themselves, right? Because I think it's really, really difficult if you cannot, if you know thyself, if you cannot lead yourself productively and compassionately and impactfully, it's never going to work for other people. And, or it will, but maybe not in a functional way. So I think it really starts, that's why I think self-development is so important. I write quotes, and one of the ones that I'm working on that will be put up tomorrow is about recognizing your gifts. And I think that when people aren't able to do that, it really prevents them from aligning with doing the things that they are passionate about, right? And so I think it's helping people like that question, right there, you're able to see what causes that spark for them. And I think when they are aware of what causes a spark in them and what allows them to be open and receptive to other people is when they are open and receptive to themselves.
Yes.
Right. And so yes, I think professional development is extremely important, but I think personal development is number one in my opinion. And if there is someone, because we've known great leaders and we've known leaders that that's just not their jam. They're just,
Yes.
And there are quiet leaders. I have worked for quiet leaders that were amazing, right? So we have to also be careful about to your point earlier about, we know the leaders that have this great, bombastic personality and love everybody, but how are they when it comes to leading and growing people, right? Versus just being their buddy.
Yes.
That is not leadership. And it is having the hard conversations. That is leadership. And that can be compassionate leadership. Some of the hardest conversations are the result are the greatest lessons learned. And so I think the other part of that too is what I said earlier. How am I showing up? What are my actions telling this person? So if I can have that impact where they look at me and go, here are the things that I really like. But I think it's helping people discover what their gifts and their talents are, and then how they can use those, not only in leading people, but also how they can lead themselves better, more effectively.
Yeah, I love it. I love the self-development piece because too often we overlook that, especially in organizations. I think there's an opportunity to be more invested in our own development and own that outright. Having said that, the organization also does have a role and should have ownership in actually ensuring that their employees are developed, because so often we hear organizations talk about the culture, right? The culture that we want to have inside from a leadership perspective, but it's hard to find beyond the plaque on the wall, right? Or on the tagline in the presentation that's given at a national kickoff, right?
Right.
It's hard to find those. And so I want to touch a little bit on where you see leadership going. We've talked a little bit about some of the elements of it. I'm excited because I believe for the first time in a very long time, there is more visibility in and on the effectiveness of leadership. In fact, last week I saw an article that Walmart is launching a corporate-wide leadership program on kindness. And when I saw it, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And in my head, my strategy side was like, okay, how are you going to measure it? Right? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to reinforce it? Because we should all be kind. But what does kindness translate to? And so I'm interested to hear from your experience, the work that you've done at the Leadership Institute, the work that you do on a daily basis. Where is leadership going when you think about the next, 3 to 5 years? Where do you see it going, Nicki?
So in my world or in the world at large?
I'll take both. You listen.
Okay.
Don't get that. You as a guest every day. Take everything I can.
So you were talking earlier about, having that leader that you can go to and have an honest conversation about, hey, I'm just not feeling fulfilled, right? We've heard the term quiet quitting over and over, and I don't care what anybody says, it's alive and well and still there. That, in my humble opinion, is a result of people feeling undervalued and underappreciated. And the truth is they are undervalued and underappreciated. And that really comes from leadership that is focused on bottom line versus the people. And, I love that you said, how are you going to measure kindness? So something that I've been studying and really looking forward to seeing how it manifests over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm hearing more and more and learning more and more about love-led leadership, which is basically helping leaders align their actions with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning. And so it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that self-development. I can be leading a team of 250 people, but if I don't know who I am and what I bring to the table, wrong, right, or indifferent, that makes it really, really difficult to be clear on the outcome of my leadership, right? So I think that as leaders become more and more disconnected from the mission, from their people, and from their purpose,
okay,
we're going to start seeing and hearing about this, this great migration, people leaving their jobs and trying to find something else. And I think that COVID was really, in my humble opinion, it was an alarm that people, when they were at home, said, I'm miserable. Like, I am so unhappy with what I'm doing. And very often it was because they were working in an environment that was just, plug and play, just go.
Yes.
And there really wasn't that sense of we are here for a great purpose. And that purpose is ultimately to create the best experience we can for our people, for our customers, and ultimately for the world, right? So that comes from leading with a very clear sense of my purpose, my team understanding their purpose and what that looks like in the scheme of things, and for our mission and for our vision, because it all ties in, right? If it doesn't tie in, then they leave, right?
Yeah.
And if they're clear on that, again, it goes back to that communication, clarity on vision, on mission and purpose. Why are we doing this? And I am seeing and hearing more and more from millennials, but more Gen Zers, is that they want something that whatever they do has an impact in some way, shape, or form. Look at Tom's shoes, right?
Yes.
That's a perfect example of not only am I working for a cool organization, but look at what they do. So people are looking more for organizations that are led by people that are passionate, that are clear on the purpose, not only for themselves, but for the organization. And that just trickles down and creates an environment of purpose and meaning. And I really think that is what people are hungry for.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the work and research that you're doing now, and I'm excited to learn about it. And I would say that some of the folks listening to the podcast may initially be thinking to themselves, Nicki, love-led leadership. That sounds a little bit like training for kindness, right?
Yeah.
I am intrigued by it. When you think about the ability to develop some of those power skills that have often been looked at as soft skills, what does it take to move an organization to the point where that's valued and it's not just viewed as a feel good focus, right? Like, organizations love to throw power words around about culture, right? About building family, etc. How do we get them to accept words like love-led leadership as a viable way to shift the way in which their people lead, that creates a culture that people don't want to walk away from?
Because you have to mean it and you have to live it. It's one thing to say, and I look back when I was with the university, and we talked about, there was this huge DEI initiative, right? And everybody was talking about it. Do we still see how vastly important that is? Or have we said, that was important then,
Right.
it's not as important now?
Okay.
It is. Just as love-led leadership. Oh, it sounds good, but are we going to do it? And so this is also why I think you lose people. You check boxes and there's no meat behind it. There's no me as a leader. Am I walking what I'm talking?
Yes.
And if I'm not, people see through that.
Becoming a leader is exciting, but how do you ensure that your skills keep pace as your team's acumen and career ambitions grow? Now more than ever, global leaders are looking for ways to develop for the future of work. We understand the pressures of striving to balance your personal development with your team's growth. That's why we've created the Periodic Table of Leadership Development. Our interactive platform provides you with access to modern, bite-sized content, transformative tools, thought-provoking perspectives, and real-world simulations to accelerate individual and organizational performance. You've worked hard to become the leader that you are today. Now you can access our library of leadership elements, unique learning journeys, and exclusive conversations. Subscribe to our newsletter so you can be the leader your team deserves.
It was really interesting. I was with a client, and they're kind of going through some changes and shifts right now.
Right.
And they all talk about the importance of taking care of their people. Yet communication and trust is not there. Like just because you have it up here with your 3 people or your 10 people on your leadership team, what about the 250 people that are all feeling lost and disconnected? And so I think that constant communication, conversations, and clarity on what does this look like? And one of the things that I'm working on is creating love-led leadership in action. What are the 4 questions that you ask yourself before you make any decision about the organization? And not only do I do that as a leader, I'm asking my team to do that. And they're asking their team to do that. So we have this sense of consistency. That's the other word that I love, right? Consistency. And trust takes time to build. And the more that you continue to walk the talk, the more people will buy into it because you're not just saying it, you are living it. And that is where I think oftentimes the disconnect is. We have these wonderful, mission statements and, all these great fluffy things in place. But at the end of the day, people still feel like a number. And that there's a problem there. And I think part of the problem is that leadership implements it, but they don't live it.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing. Sometimes it's very difficult to observe the type of leadership that you're being asked to exemplify yourself, right? Which makes it challenging because you want to be authentic and be a genuine self. But on the other hand, you don't have good models of what good looks like within your organization, right? So you're in a little bit of a trial and error as you try to determine what makes the most sense for me as an individual, then what makes the most sense for me as a leader for my team.
Right. Right.
When you think about where organizations are, the pace at which we're moving, I was talking to a client yesterday, and when they shared one of their KPIs for the year, which was around number or percentage of salespeople making plan, I literally almost fell out of my seat. Because the first thing I said to this individual is, I said, tell me more about what's the data point for the past 24 months? And it was like a 25% delta. And I said, okay, I've been doing this for a really long time. What's in the works that's going to help you make up for a 25% difference to what you've historically done? Right. And this individual couldn't give me answers. I said, listen, I'm not telling you to push back on it, but when people put together these plans, there's a logic to it.
Mm-hmm.
May not be perfect. There's a logic. Do you understand that logic? This individual said, I have no idea where this number came from. I know we have to grow a lot this year. Market needs us to grow. We're a market leader. But this specific division that she's responsible for, she couldn't identify where that was coming from, right? And so leadership has to be more than this feel-good moment thing. There are these tactical elements of leadership that need to be developed. Where should organizations start? It seems so overwhelming when we think about the risk, when we think about the roles and responsibilities. Where do they start, Nicki?
Oh, we don't have enough time. But here's the thing that's really interesting. I have experienced what your client experienced. I have been asked to find $5 million. And I couldn't tell the people that I was supposed to be asking for this money what it was for, right? Like that is not what you do with your people, right? I think that it can start with looking at large businesses that are already doing it, right? That are already leading really, really well and leading meaningfully and like the greatest, the best places to work, right? What are those organizations doing? Why do their people feel so valued? I think when you're looking at a company, that's 100,000 employees versus a, small business owner who has 24 employees, implementation is going to be significantly different. But I still go back to what I said, and then it starts at the top. It's how you lead is what you leave, right? So how am I leading? What am I telling my people by the decisions that I'm making, by the shifts that we're taking? What am I telling my people? How am I connecting? If I have 100,000 people, there's a book, I cannot believe I can't think of the author's name. He did Undercover Boss.
Okay.
And it was so important to him to be with all levels of employees so that he could truly understand exactly what they dealt with when they checked in the morning and left at night. That was so important to him. What does that say to your employees, right? Herb Keller from Southwest Airlines, he used to go on Thanksgiving and pull luggage off planes, right? So he is walking the talk. So I think with large companies, how do you do this and how do you make hard decisions? Hard decisions can be made out of love, right? Love of making sure that your people are in a situation where they are safe, where they can thrive. And if they're not, having the courage to be able to sit down and have that honest conversation with them, right? So I think it without being redundant, it really starts at the top in that self-evaluation and then that leadership team evaluation. Are we being consistent? Are we being clear? Are we walking the talk? And how then do we want to pass this on to the next leadership team so that they in turn, and it's a ripple effect, right? And it has to be consistently visited.
Have you noticed any variations from what managers or leaders believe they're doing to actually what employees are experiencing? So I know that some recent research came out that says that 50% of managers believe, 80% of managers believe they're coaching, and under 50% of employees believe they are coached by their managers. But when I hear that, right, it makes me dizzy. It's like, wait a minute, how do we have?
Where's the disconnect?
Yeah. Like who's missing the train, right? Like someone's missing the train here.
So I think that the fault of that is not surveying your people on a regular basis, right? If you survey your people every quarter, right, you're going to know. And so then you can identify the fact that these people are not feeling like they are being coached, right? Sometimes they don't ask. They just think that because they're doing it, everything's fine. What is the saying that, well, if you don't hear anything, that's good. No, it's not. It's terrible.
Yes.
Right? No news is good news. No, that's not true. Right? I'm going to go out and find the news because I need to know what's up with my people. Right? And if they're not doing that, so I don't think that they ask. Sometimes I don't think they want to know, but I think that falls short of surveying your people on a regular basis, which I think is extremely important. And I will tell you, this is so interesting. And because I was the leader of the business that I owned. And when I was at the chamber, and then I went to work and I became an employee. Oh, it was fascinating to hear the complaints and all of the, disgruntled employees. Yet my boss would say, everything's fine. And that was a fascinating experience for me because I hadn't been in an employee role. I've always been in the boss role. And I used to ask myself, gosh, were my employees saying this?
Yeah. And to your point I think there's a formal way, surveys, assessments, things that can be done. Well, to some that you said earlier, it's just about checking in with people, right? I was
100%.
working with people leaders earlier this week, and we talked about the power of just being able to slow down and to say to someone who's on the other side of the conversation, how are you? And most of us are programmed to say, oh, I'm great. And then dive into the business. And as leaders, we have to be able to stop them and slow it down to say, no, we're going to talk about the business. We have time for that set aside today. I want to know how you're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And consistently do that, not just once.
Yes.
Consistently do that, because that's what's going to build that trust and that vulnerability, not only on your end, but ultimately their end, where they can come and say, hey, Ed, I'm being coached and I'm just not it's not going anywhere.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. This is what excites me about the future of leadership is we have leaders like you, trailblazers who are thinking about new ways of leading and developing and making sure that leaders have access to tools and resources. Can you think back to a leader that you've experienced in your career, on your journey, that stood out to you? And if you can, I'm interested to have you share what stood out about their leadership style.
I first one that comes to mind, believe it or not, it was when I was 17 years old and I was working at a gym, and the owner of the gyms, not my manager, the owner of all the gyms, which there were like 25 in the area, came up to me and he said, "Nicki, I want to take you to a conference." And he introduced me to, at the time, the motivational speakers of the world, the Zig Ziglars, oh my gosh, I know them all and now I'm freezing up, but like the old school motivational speakers. And he saw something in me that I didn't see. Obviously, I was extremely young, but he was such a advocate of my growth and of my discovery of my gifts and talents. I owe a debt of gratitude to that guy. And that is what you were talking about earlier, how to develop people. He saw it, but he would come in and have, just conversations with all of these people. And this is an owner of multiple locations. And he always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room, and not in a superficial way, in a meaningful way, meaningful enough that he came back to me and said, "I want to take you to this conference." Wow. So I will never forget that. And to this day, that's why I think it's so important to get to know people so that you can help them get to know their gifts and talents. And are they in the right place? It's the best thing you can do for them.
Yeah. And I love that. I'll share an analogy someone gave me recently. I was talking to a mentor who means the world to me. She helped me literally change the trajectory of my career. And I was, again, showering her with thanks and all the good things. And she said, I really didn't do much. Was a mirror that was leaning against your leg. And I just simply held it up in front of you so that you can see yourself the way the rest of us saw you. And she said, I saw things that are rare, and I wanted you to see those things for yourself. And so to your point, Nicki, we need those advocates who are leaders that are willing to pick up the proverbial mirror and raise it in front of us so that we can see who we are, because they see things in us. Organizations also then have the responsibility, as we talked about earlier, to invest in the development of those individuals so that those skills start to build, right? Not only competencies, but proficiencies. How well can I use these new skills that you've given me, and understand that that's a journey in and of itself as well. I think when we do those things, we'll see a much more agile, engaged, impactful leader than what the statistics show us today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I agree wholeheartedly. And just something quickly that I wanted to touch on when you were talking about, assessments. This is another mistake I think that organizations make, is they give their employees, the DISC assessment, right? And then they have, here's the feedback. And that's it.
Yes.
Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Right. And it's the responsibility of the leadership. If you're going to go to that step, to have this assessment and have them develop their strengths, discover their strengths and what they're really good at, how are you going to help them hone those strengths and use those strengths? You can't just go, here you go. Yeah, this is what we know about you. Good luck. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
That to me is such a missed opportunity.
And far too often, organizations do exactly what you described, right? They set up the readout of the results, and then they're like, there you go. Now you know more about yourself than you knew before, right? Good luck. We hope this.
Yeah. So I think that's a missed opportunity. If you're going to do that for your team, what are you going to do with it once they have the information and you have the information? And in my humble opinion, you need to do something with that. Okay, now that we know this about you, let's talk about how we can implement these strengths more effectively for you so that you really feel like you are in the role or in the position that that you are really great at because it's natural for you.
And you don't have to go 0 to 100. Again, it could be progressive, right? With some small amounts, small bits of exposure. I love the fact that, again, you had the gym owner come to you and say, I want to give you this exposure, right? Because I see something in you. And that's taking small steps. I believe many organizations still have an opportunity to do that at scale. I know that things are hard. Things have changed. I hear it every day. Organizations talking about watching budget and trying to get ROI for everything that they invest in. Well, my general thought is if you don't invest in your leaders, then who do you invest in? Right?
Yeah, you're so spot on. And research shows that the more that you have an environment of, let's just say, love-led leadership, and the principles of love-led leadership include kindness and compassion and all those things that we know about, that those organizations that are doing that consistently, loving their people, loving their team, loving the organization, buy into the mission, their numbers, their ROI is through the roof compared to companies who do not do that. Like, the research is there. I'm not making that up or just saying because it sounds good. It's there. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity to change the way we work with people and people work. And I think it is, especially with this next generation who is so passionate about making impactful change, that this really is an opportunity for us to get to know the incredible impact that our people can have if we just give them a chance.
Yeah. And I love that, right? Because you're only as good as your people. We've heard that said before, but I also believe that you can start to build a leadership tree, if you will, right? And when I think back to the leaders that I've experienced in my life, there's a group of folks who they've influenced. And those folks are now influencing a group of leaders. And those leaders are now influencing a group of leaders, right? And that's how we actually build a robust ecosystem of leaders, because the numbers are there, right? Like we see the numbers every year that the cost of bad management is going through the roof. We're losing good employees. We're losing knowledge workers. We're losing all of those things. Well, the way to start to turn that around is to build that next wave of outstanding leaders that are passionate, that are empathetic, that are authentic, right? That lead with love.
That lead with love.
The leaders that we have to invest in.
Yeah, amen.
So, Nicki, before we wrap up this episode, I want to give you an opportunity to share where can people follow your journey, learn more about your brilliant work that you're doing, stay engaged with you. What are the channels or outlets that you want people to know about so that they can follow your work?
Thank you. Right now, the best place is LinkedIn. I do my leadership posts every Tuesday, on my quotes every Tuesday, and my inspirational quotes every Thursday. I will be unveiling a new business venture May-ish. And so Nicki at NickiAnderson.com, which will be where you'll find me then. But until then, connect with me on LinkedIn. I mean, that's how we met, and what a gift that's been. So if anybody wants to reach out or has questions, we're all here to help each other.
Yeah, I agree. And that is one of the things that I love, because what our audience doesn't know is we had a pre-call, we had a chance to get to know each other. And then before this episode started being recorded, we had a chance to catch up and have good conversation. It's getting to know other people who share similar passions, who see things in similar ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it has to be identical, right? You're bringing your perspective from your experience and your knowledge and insight. And that means other leaders can bring those things forward too. And when we do that, I believe we put ourselves in a better position to create a better ecosystem that's more dynamic, that has the elements of leadership incorporated within it.
Yeah, it's rich in experience and knowledge and perspective. And from there, there's so much that you can do together. I completely agree. It's just been an honor to spend this time with you. Thank you. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And on behalf of our entire team, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for pouring back into leaders across the globe in the work that you do every day, because I know that oftentimes leaders like you don't get their proverbial flowers often enough. So I want to make sure that on behalf of our entire team, I say thank you for the work that you're doing in the community.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful and really appreciate it, and look forward to chatting soon.
Yes, yes. And for all of our listeners here today, I want to encourage you to sign up, click the bell, subscribe, so that when we have new episodes like this that become available, you are amongst the first to know. I'll encourage you to interact with this content on your favorite social media or podcast platform. And lastly, I'll encourage you to reach out to Nicki, connect with her. You will be so, so glad that you did. She is a brilliant leader, and it was an honor to have her here today. And this wraps up this episode of Conversations That Matter. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Conversations That Matter with Ed Ross. By subscribing to Conversations That Matter wherever you get your podcasts, you're taking a step towards becoming the leader you aspire to be. Subscribe to Conversations That Matter today and be part of a community dedicated to creating meaningful change, one conversation at a time.